session is broadcasted or recorded. It's just that people find it useful later on. Is that all right? Thank you. Okay, thank you everybody for joining. My name is Paveen and I work at the University of Sheffield and Doncaster and Bassett Law Teaching Hospitals as Professor of Nursing and Professor of Gender-Based Violence. And these sessions, we do it, generally speaking, once a month to allow people to. It's broadcasted. Yeah, just muted. I could hear myself on the YouTube as well. To try and develop capacity. My role at DBTH involves developing capacity, research capacity among nurses, midwives, and allied health professionals specifically, but generally within the clinical colleagues. And we do these sessions to provide more opportunities for people to talk about research, to answer their questions, and to basically help people develop their careers and improve their practice as wherever they are practicing. And that's what we do. I will give it to Sarah to introduce herself and we can just take it on from there.
Thank you. Hi, Paveen. I hope you can hear me. I've just gone through every headset in the library at the RI now, and I'm reduced to shouting at the webcam. So I'm the clinical librarian, and I support staff throughout Doncaster and Bassett Law Trust with whatever they need in terms of literature searches and evidence to support clinical decision-making, managerial decision-making, and research. So database searching is my thing, but I've been working with Paveen on these writing for publication webinars because the library has a sort of an underlying support mechanism available to staff. So if you're at DBTH, then hopefully I won't be a stranger to you. But if you're tuning in from another trust, then your own library service will be able to offer very similar things to what I provide for DBTH.
Yeah, and we call these workshops, when we started last year, writing for publication workshops, but they're not necessarily only about publications. These are about research skills. And again, if you're saying research skills, it depends on where you are in terms of your career trajectory. You could use the principle to even just talk about, like, for example, if you were going to do an assignment and for any of your courses and you was looking. So the principles usually remains very similar on whatever topic you discuss, but it depends on how you apply it in practice. So today I could do this session in kind of more than one ways. One is that I could just traditionally talk to you about the usual general stuff, and then we can ask questions. But or we could also try and kind of go for a question and answer sort of formats, or if I know what your expectations are from the talk, then I could tailor my what we're talking about it according to it, so it's something which is useful for you. So since we are a small group, would you mind introducing yourself, maybe using a chat function in there, as to let us know what your role is and who you are, where you work, and what is it that you would like to learn from the session. So while everybody's doing it, how would you prefer this session to be done? Do you want me to go through the slides and then we can have a chat, or shall we go through talking through questions? Which one would you prefer? Option 1 or option 2? So option 1, people can use some kind of smiley. So thumbs up is for option 1, clapping is for option 2. So, and I forgot what was the option 1. Going through the slides and then having questions. Okay, so it sounds like most people are saying option 1. All right. Let's do option 1. So what I am going to do is just talk to you for sort of a few minutes to talk about research question or the issues that we encountered doing developing research question, and then we can talk about your questions or specific queries. So I've already told you who I am. Developing a research question or developing or thinking about a topic is always very difficult. So regardless of where you are in your career, you must have felt that if you were given an assignment where you were writing an essay, it's usually is very difficult to think of a topic that you want to work on. So everybody is like, you spend quite a lot of time thinking about what topic shall I choose, or what do I do? And if you make it a little bit more simpler, and if I just relate it to your daily practice, and I think probably everyone would understand that, you know, in your homes, yourself, your mother, your somebody who's doing it. So, or we, all of us, we ask these questions in the evening: what should we have for tea, or what should we have for lunch or dinner today? And what then happens? How do you decide what are we going to have for tea today? I will just allow you the ability to unmute yourself. Yes, you can unmute yourself. So just maybe just raise your hand, and I can, so that we're not talking over each other, if that's okay. How do you has anyone had this problem of deciding what do we have for tea, and how do you solve that problem? Come on, you all are very decisive. You know what you're having for your tea in the evening.
I think the children what they want.
Sorry, yeah, speak.
I said I tend to ask the children what they want if I've not already decided what we're having.
Okay, and then what happens?
Both children have a difference of opinions.
And then?
I probably pick whichever is the quickest and easiest to cook.
Exactly. So it's usually an executive decision that's afterwards, isn't it? That what should be, and then usually the thing is, but if you knew, or if you were doing it, why are you even asking us to do that? Okay, so I don't know who that was. Helen, you had a hand up. Was that you, Helen, or was it somebody else?
I did have a hand up. Yeah, I was just going to answer the question by saying I consider a few factors. So I don't ask my children what they want. That's not one of the factors. Generally time. So what's happening that evening, how late I'm working, what everybody's doing in the house. So when we can eat and how long we've got to eat, how long it'll take to cook, and when things have got expiry dates. Looking through and going, that veggies maybe needs using up, or that's got this tomorrow's date on, we're going to have to use that tonight, that kind of thing. So yeah, a few factors.
Thank you. So Sarah, I can't see, I'm outside of the screen, so I can't see anyone, and I can't see hands up. So would you be okay to manage that?
Yeah, sure, I'll keep an eye.
So exactly. So when we are trying to talk about, to making any decision, be it is about what we are eating or something like that, it's usually is this thing that, oh my God, how do we do it? And we start off by asking ourselves, by asking others, then having a look at what surrounds it. It's usually a messy process. So if you struggle with thinking of what question shall I talk about or pick up for my, if it's a research, if it's an audit, or if it's an evaluation, or even if it is about what are you going to have in the evening. So all those questions are usually tricky ones, and it needs a little bit of process for us to go through it and decide what are we going to do. So what I was trying to say, that these process is similar, is not very different, if anyone thinks it's too complicated. So there are 5 rules, R rules I call them. So 5 rules of R which you need to consider. One is read, like reading widely, looking at the aspect around your work, and kind of, around these areas of interest that you have, allows you to see what is being researched at the moment, what are the gaps in the current knowledge, and that also sometimes when you're working in your you see the issue, but you're never sure, is it only me who is seeing this issue, or have other people have picked up on this or not? And that's where reading comes in, and that allows you to see, is it relevant or is it not relevant? Is it just me thinking about it, or are there other people have done some work? And if they have done some work, what is it which is missing from that work, or what do we know about it? So reading is something which helps, and I know that all of us usually have quite short time for reading. So that's one thing. The other one is looking at relevance to you. Is the question or is the thing that you're trying to do is relevant to you? And example that I usually give, that I would very much like to kind of, do research on how rockets are developed. And I'm very much interested in that, but is that relevant to me? Is that relevant to my role? Can I do something about it? And if I cannot do something about it, then, should I actually be, would I have the authority and the ability to do it? It's like, if I go back to that cooking sort of thing, that if I want to, I would really like to have, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of an example, biryani, let's say. Yeah. But if I don't know how to make it, and if I don't have if I've never had it, then yes, I can probably do it, but it will be much more difficult. So you have to see other factors around it. And how is it relevant to you? Are people going to eat at the home? Like if I cook all of that, would people like it? So you have to think of all those aspects around this. If you come to clinical practice, I teach advanced care practitioners and nurses practitioners. So a lot of time people, when they are doing assignments or work around evidence-based practice and looking at stuff. So they pick up, for example, comparison between ibuprofen and paracetamol. And I usually ask them this question that, okay, fine. If you identified one is better than the other, what is it that you're going to do about it? Yeah. What is it that if you have the influence and the ability to change that practice, or is it already an established fact and you're trying to explore something different? So then you have to see, can I do anything about it? Is it relevant to me in my practice? Do I have the ability and authority to do something around that in terms of making changes? And when I'm saying authority doesn't mean that your role authority, as in kind of you've got a title or something, but it is about do you understand enough about the issue? Are you embedded enough into that practice? And are there already guidelines? Like if I say paracetamol and ibuprofen, NICE has worked around it. There are established guidelines and everything else available around that. And if you're looking at the same old question, is it worth doing it? So I think that's something that you need. And I think reading helps you with that aspect, because then you know what people have already done. Reflection. Looking at your practice, when you are doing some practice, at the end of the day, usually at the end of the day, it's good practice to try and kind of reflect and see what went well and what didn't, and on any specific issues, because then it slowly and gradually helps you identify what is it that attracts your attention, what topics attract your attention and why, what are the issues around it, and what can you do? And then remaining focused. Remaining focused is about, like, if thinking of a topic or thinking about what to cook for tea is really difficult, and it's very easy to jump from one thing to the other, thinking of, oh, I can't do this, let's do this. Sticking to it, remaining focused as to why you want to do it, and then spending enough time trying to develop that idea further would help. If you just jump from one thing to the other, you will go through the same process again and would not come to a conclusion. So these are 5R rules. And last one is reaching out, talking to people. I think we underestimate the importance of talking to people or asking people. People are usually fearful. Sometimes they just think, if I discuss my idea with somebody, it's going to be taken out and somebody else is going to pick it, and I wouldn't have the ability to work on that. People are fearful that what the other person is going to think about me. Is this idea am I making sense? Am I not making sense? People think other people are busy. They don't have time for me. So how do I actually go and say this? So there are various different points which hinders your ability to ask questions, but make sure that you reach out. Talk to your colleagues, talk to people who you think understand the issue or the topic, or generally, more than one topic. And what it does is that all of these things allow you to develop your thought about that particular issue slowly and gradually. So it helps you cook that thought over time and make it much more focused and something that you can work with. So that's the first step. Why do we ask questions? Well, we ask questions because we want to have a direction and focus. We want to know some information. It helps us to plan things better. It helps us, if we are developing a review question, it helps us in searching literature. It helps identify appropriate methods, and it provides a framework. So it is like knowing, if you know, and if you ask, if you take the example of navigator, for example, you have to tell them where you are going. So if I want to go to this address or this postcode or this place, and then it allows you to choose between, do you want to travel by car? Do you want to take public transport? Do you want to walk? And how do you want to go? So it gives you that direction and focus, and all of these things which I've written here. And then it just makes it easier for you to do, to go. And talking to people helps you see, is this making sense to other people? So my new module has just started. I teach evidence-based practice module, and there are ACPs from advanced care practitioners and clinicians from various different places who are doing that module. And the theme which I'm picking up right now is that one of the questions that they need to answer is, what is a practice that you would like to change in your workplace or in your clinical area? And a theme which I am looking at the moment is that people give the example, but it's in a way, as an outsider, I'm finding it really difficult to understand. So they would say, for instance, I would like to buy this equipment XYZ, and because that would just make things easier for staff, but they're not actually telling you what is the problem. Why they're not telling you what is the problem? Because the problem is very clear in their head and they understand what they are saying. But because I don't have that contextual information which they have, I would, or other readers would not understand that. So talking to other people and asking questions is partly also to try and explain it in a way that it is understandable to other people. So if you're making pasta or biryani, it should be like, when you're presenting it, then other people shouldn't have to ask you, like, have you made pasta or biryani? They could see on the dish and they could decide what it is. And that comes back if you have decided earlier on what is it that you're doing and you're asking the question in the right kind of way. So where do research questions come from? A little bit like what we have talked about, either from a theory, an organized body of concepts, or something that we already know. So for example, we already know that if someone has temperature, the pulse would increase. So that's the already established theory, and there is something from that we would like to explore further. So that's where it comes from. It provides conceptually rich topic, like things that we already know. It provides confirmation of some aspects of the theory or negation of some aspects of the theory, but we are looking around an established fact or theory which is already there. It comes from personal experiences and observations, so something that you constantly observe, and that's where the 5 rule of ours comes that we talked about earlier on. And once you start thinking through that particular topic in more clarity, that's where you make it makes it more sense. Or we want to replicate, so things which are done in one particular country, in one particular setting, in one particular place, are not done in other places. So do we want to do that? So if one example is, I was teaching students quite some 2-3 years back in another country, and what they were talking about, that all of the treatment and around the cardiac problems, some of this depends on how big the heart is, the weight and kind of the length and everything of heart. And but most of the studies in relation to that are coming from a very white Caucasian population, which means that I think I should, before this, I should have said that the how weight and height of the heart depends on who you are. It's proportional to your ethnicity, your general height and weight and everything else. And that determines the medication, the treatment that you're getting. But majority of the studies that we have, on the basis of which the treatment decisions are made, are coming from white populations. So are they reliable and suitable on other populations? So if that's something that you wanted to study, and you're saying that this is coming from, let's suppose, population in Pakistan, and we want to do a similar study, let's say in China or Indonesia or America, so we can make appropriate tailored decisions, then that's the replication. So you probably are using the same concept, same questions, same methodology, but trying to replicate to try and see, will you come back with the same answers or will it be different? And identified gaps in the literature and evidence. So when literature is already reviewed about a topic, this is where you pick up that literature and you look at what gaps are already identified and where can you add things into it. So that's where research questions coming from. We need to think of, there are topics which are researchables and there are topics which are not researchable. So researchable topics are those which can be investigated through the collection and analysis of the data. So there is a, something which is a question, and you are able to think through, how am I going to collect the data? How am I going to, and how am I going to be able to answer that particular question? If there is that thread, we can do it. Have been conducted ethically. So, researchable topics are those where so if we take, for example, COVID-19 as a topic. So COVID-19, and, we wanted to, for example, see how COVID-19 is affecting people, or how would it have impact on their cardiovascular system or respiratory system. We can't inject people with the COVID-19 virus to be able to see what's going on. That's not ethical. Yeah, we cannot do. But what you can do is observe people who have the disease, who have the condition, to see, what is happening to them. But again, you can't just kind of not do anything about it, because you just wanted to understand what's happening to people. So you need to give some treatment. You need to help and support them throughout the process. But still, you can observe as to what's happening to those patients. Like any research question, I'm using this example, but any research questions have to be something which can be done ethically and appropriately. Okay, have theoretical or practical significance. There is some use of it. If you are able to answer that question, you're going to get something out of it. It's going to benefit the community, the humanity, the patient population that you're serving, the clinical population that you're working with, the organization that you're working with. Some things is going to benefit from it, and it has got some practical significance. Or it contributes to the educational processes. We understand what we are doing. And those are some of the research-able questions. And the last one, so again, I think it was Helen who said that when you decide to cook something, you see, okay, fine, what's doable, what's available, what can I do, depends on the situation in the house. Is somebody coming from outside? All of those factors. So researchable topic are those which can be adequately researched given the expertise, resources, time constraints of the researcher. Okay, as I said, I want to do research on rockets, but do I have the expertise? No. Do I have the resources? No. Are there any kind of time? Probably, maybe, yes or not. So, but you have to consider all of these pieces of jigsaw puzzle to be able to decide if that's a researchable topic or not. Okay. Then there are some topics which are non-researchable. So for example, philosophical or ethical issues. So I usually use the example of like, does God exist? You will always have more than one point of view, and both point of view are kind of, equally strong from the people who are presenting those point of view. And what is it that you're going to get out of it? So philosophical or ethical questions, issues that cannot be resolved through the collection and analysis of data, should question moral questions, like ultimately these are matter of opinions. How should we behave? What should we do? You will have some people, how should we behave on Twitter? Okay, so you will have some people who say, well, we should always be talking about positive things, and you will have people who say, no, we need to talk about things which are generally happening, be it negative, positive. We just need to kind of be open and honest about it. So there are usually kind of, these are matter of opinion, and there is no right or wrong way of dealing with it. Are we okay so far? Any questions, or can we carry on? Okay. Well, I take it as a no and carry on. So common problems. Common problem, I think some of these we've already discussed, but let's just recap it. Deciding which area or topic to look for. What is it that we are going to make today, cook today? Inability to think of a topic, not being able to decide, not being able to understand what is it that I would like to work on. Knowing which specific area or subtopic to focus on. Okay. Inability to clearly articulate a question, clearly state this question that you want to do, and going too quickly. So these are the common problems that people usually encounter. Common mistakes, wanting to change the world. So when I support PhD students, and when you have PhD students, when they or even master's students, when they want to go do their dissertation, usually people want to change the world, and you have to kind of, they find it really difficult to understand when you want them to focus and specify on one single aspect, and generally are not happy about it, because they think that if I change or made that topic too specific, I'm just not doing much. So I wanted to change the world. But the thing is that you're unlikely to change the world. So therefore, try, and you can perhaps change the world if you did it in a smaller pieces. So an example which I usually give to students is that, have you seen the needle through which a thread is thrown? So the sewing needles, or kind of, the stitching needles. Somebody actually must have spent their lives looking at the small little hole where the thread is going, and must have written thesis of 200,000 words. So anything that you focus on in itself is a very big aspect. So never think a topic is too specific. It's actually good to come up with a specific issue, because then you can broaden it a little bit, and it's easier to do it. It's contained, and you can actually do that, because otherwise the project could be too ambitious and you could be stuck into it. Setting out to prove something. Okay. This position is philosophically flawed, because any research that we do generally doesn't prove anything. Things improve. So even, for example, the best version of an equipment or something, let's say iPhone, for example, that we have, that's not the best. It probably is the best ever for now, but it's never going to be. So you cannot prove that it's the only option available, because things change. And so it's a flawed sort of positions to be able to try and prove something about that. And you could put that into any other in relation to any other topic as well. Deciding on your methods first. And I usually give example of this, that it is like going and choosing your shoes first, and then deciding on the clothes or on the suit or the dress that you're looking for. Yeah. Or looking for accessories first, and then going and choosing yours. So it never works like that. You always have to have your question first. So deciding that, okay, fine, I'm going to use a qualitative approach, but have not got a sense of what question you're going to answer, or what is the trouble that or problem that you want to focus on. Problem or research question always gives rise to an understanding of what methods should you be choosing, and it's not the other way around, if that makes sense. Okay, so really you need to be very clear on a research question. You need to then follow those, be able to develop a methods, and then you need to then follow that methods to be able to answer those questions. Okay, I will come back to this later. And examples of, okay, so a good question should actually provide you with who does it relate to, what is your population, what is it that you want to do, and what exactly is the outcome that you are looking for. A good question is developed when you have developed an appropriate aims or purpose statement if you're working on a qualitative study. So something like this. The study needs to be conducted because, so what is the reason for you to think about this? This topic of the study is or will be, and the purpose of this study, and then you can use the methodology, whatever you're saying. What is your purpose? What is your central phenomena of the study? Who your participants will be? What is it that you want to achieve? And that relates to both the aspect of the qualitative and quantitative questions. With qualitative studies, people usually struggle with identifying or developing a purpose statement. But a purpose statement should usually explain major aims or intent or roadmap of the study, and it should be a single sentence. And the same goes for the research question that you're doing. It should be a single sentence. It includes the purpose of the study, why you want to do it, the central phenomena, what is it that you want to achieve, who your participants will be, and where the research site is. And here I've given you some good examples of qualitative research. Aims to examine barriers and facilitators to physical activity and exercise among ethnically diverse older adults who have fallen. To understand how strategic stakeholders understand and respond to the UK Safer Patient Initiative. To understand how clinical staff on medical wards identify, classify, narrativize, and orient to patient safety risk, and to explore the psychosocial consequences of falling and views on fall prevention of older people and hospitalized after a fall. I've deliberately chosen these methods statement from various different years, and they're slightly older. The reason being that as we move on into time, the way we express things, the way we write things, the way we understand things changes. And it's worth kind of looking onto these statements and see, can you actually pick up something, and can you actually a pattern that if you were going to do the same studies today, is that how you're going to write it, or would you frame the research question or aims of the study slightly differently? So because our audience have changed, the way we talk have changed, the way we communicate, it has become different. So there is usually an increment or a change into it. Good qualitative research question should begin with W words on how or what. State when you're attempting to discover, generate, explore, identify, or describe. Ask what happened to help clarify or craft your question. Ask what was the meaning to people of what happened to understand your results. Ask what happened over time to explore the processes. It's usually W questions. Same goes with the quantitative aspect as well. So question development is usually a cycle. One of the other things which I wanted to cover before we talk about the cycle is that when it comes to quantitative research, people usually struggle with, or as an editor, I also see that or master's students or PhD students would have a hypothesis, would have a research question, would have objectives, all three in the same paper on the same document. Three or four of these are the same thing. You don't need to have all of them into it, unless you are doing it because you wanted to get the conceptual clarity by presenting the same information in different ways. You don't need to present all these three things about the same questions. It needs to be one or the other. If you're using statistical methods and you want to make sure that you have to develop hypothesis and you have to be very clear in your head, maybe just use hypothesis and that's fine. Maybe just stick only with the objectives or research question, stick with one with it. And if you want to have more than one, just make sure that they are consistent. But actually, you don't need all three of them. You only probably want to work on all three of them because to get some conceptual clarity in your head to understand the process better. But when it comes to writing, you just only need one or the other. You don't need all three of them. Okay, so developing a question is a reflective process. You think about a topic, about an issue that you have understood, that you've identified, you have a hunch somewhere, there's a practice, there's a problem that I want to change, you want to think about that, read around the topic, understand around the issue that you have, reflect on what you were already thinking the problem was, and if you're reading and understanding, talking to other people have helped you change it slightly, have that idea develop, talk to mentor, or talk to other people or colleagues and other people who are authority or who have got the knowledge around that. that will help you change your thinking perhaps a little bit more, or may give you a few more questions to think about. Go back and read again, and that's how you develop it. So it's a cyclical process. It doesn't stop at one place, and it helps you develop your question better and better as you move through it. Some question development framework which are basically developed to develop review questions. For example, PICO. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of that, so we'll just talk about that in a minute. So PICO, PEO, SPICE, which are there to help people develop their review questions so that they can conduct an appropriate literature review, can also be used to develop research questions, because they force you to think about what is your population, what is your exposure or intervention or thing that you want to look at. Are there any comparison groups who you are comparing with what, and what is the outcome that you're looking for? So even if you're not doing a review question and you wanted to do a research question or something, try and use that model to gather your thoughts and to help come up with specific words. Once you have written something on the paper, you can always alter it, change it, modify it, improve it. If it's not on the paper, if it's just in your head, it's going to be really difficult to modify or change it. So try and write those aspects onto the paper, and then try and kind of change and relate to it. So that's kind of a generic overview about looking at a research topic or research question. And I am conscious that it would not have probably kind of your expectations or things that you have in mind. And therefore, I'm happy to take questions, and let's have a discussion around the specific questions that you have and things that you would like to explore. Would you like to add anything else, Sarah? I don't know if it was just a broad overview or if I've missed anything, or.
I can do a little bit more on the research question frameworks, if that would be helpful, because it's hard to bear those in mind if you've not seen them kind of visually, but I've got something I can share if that would help. But if you want to do questions and answers first, then that's obviously fine too.
Yeah, why don't you get that ready, and I'll try and take a couple of questions, and then we go for the frameworks, and then we take any further questions. Is that okay?
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Any questions, anyone? It doesn't need to be questions related to what I've said. It could be a question that you have come, or the thing that you wanted to learn from this session and I have covered or I haven't covered, and how it relates to your work that you're doing. So just ask. If I can't answer, I will just tell you that I don't know. So it's okay to ask.
Can I ask a question, please, Parveen?
Yeah, sure.
Very good presentation. Thank you. So I've got now. I'm doing my dissertation at the moment. I need to find the research questions about it, and I've got an idea. I think I found a kind of a gap in the clinical practice, that there is now. I've realized that there is algorithm and pathways about the hyperkalemia, but there is no pathways or algorithms about the hypokalemia.
Yeah.
So, and because from my daily kind of clinical practice, I observe that because the hypokalemia is not that common compared to the hyperkalemia, people, they don't know how to manage it, especially the severe one when they have a patient. So that's my side. That's my actually observation of it. So I am trying to create a research question, like if we need a kind of hypokalemia algorithm or protocol in A&E in order to improve the quality of care, and because hypokalemia has the same life-threatening side effects compared to the hyperkalemia, but nationally or locally there's nothing. So I'm thinking, do I need to explore and discover and approve that there is a need to create an algorithm, or just do something else around it?
So I think both of these aspects go hand in hand. So one is that you're thinking about that, okay, fine, there is this. So it could be that there are various possibilities. One is that it may be that it's just you who just think that there is a pathway developed on hyperkalemia and nothing is there in hypokalemia. So first thing is trying and looking for what's already available and what sort of pathways or other things are there. And then the other thing is like, and I'm not talking as a clinician, I'm just talking as a person. So is management of hypokalemia is completely kind of switched to the mirror versions of hyperkalemia. So basically, the studies who are talking about hyperkalemia, have they been talking about hypokalemia as well, or is it a different body of literature? Okay, and all those questions you will only know once you have looked at the literature. So it sounds to me more like a systematic review, literature review type of a project, where you may want to start off with looking at available evidence, the current, maybe just go back and try and find any systematic review or literature review which is conducted more recently on the topic of hyperkalemia. But it would be better if it's on hypokalemia, because then it will allow you to see what we already know in a kind of a nutshell sort of thing, because, you know, people would have looked at the evidence and would have said something around that. And then it would allow you to identify that elements of the PICO, PEO question. So the other thing is come up with that. So who is your population that you wanted to talk about? So it's people admitted in emergency department. Are we talking about adults? Are we talking about children? What age range and what? So what is the intervention on exposure that we are talking about? So you're saying about hypokalemia, so low potassium and things like that. Are you comparing it with something else? Okay, or do you have to say hypokalemia, or is it potassium level, or, you know, are there any different terms which are there? What sort of outcome you're looking for? Kind of, you know, we're saying hypokalemia, the impact of hypokalemia. You can specify what are the impacts of, like, for example, the clinical symptoms that people must have talked about, or the is it death, is it kind of the cardiac problems, what is it that we, so then that those elements which would allow you to develop a review question properly, which will then allow you to develop a specific search strategy which you can use to look at the literature to come up with the question that you want to answer. And once you have seen what literature says about it, those findings will enable you to develop a pathway that you would like to have for your practice. Once you have the pathway, then you will go and test and see if that works. You know, what do people think about it and all the rest of the stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I've done a small kind of systematic review to my previous module. That's from where I got the idea, actually. And because the hypokalemia is very rare, there's no much actually research about it. But I found some actually recent articles saying that there is a need to create a pathway because the hypokalemia can actually cause life-threatening side effects of it. But yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you.
So, and then if you have done that aspect, the next aspect probably is to develop a research sort of research proposal, research kind of idea of research, which is then there are different ways of looking at it. So one could be that looking at the patients and trying and see people who have been affected by hypokalemia, how, you know, what was the impact of them, what was the level. So maybe you want to look at the records previously done of those people, depending on how you may want to do a prospective study, like looking at following up people who are affected by hypokalemia going forward. And, you know, what is it that you need to know? You may want to do a different study talking to clinicians and say, well, okay, fine, how do you develop, how do you interact, or how do you solve the issue of hypokalemia? Do you see it? Is there a need of pathway? And, you know, if it is, then what should be? So you may use a Delphi technique to develop something. So there are different ways of solving the same problem, or trying to look at the problem for different angle. But I would start off with a systematic review, which if you've already done, then looking at the research, the proposals, and then the research question, but then trying to see, what am I doing? Are we looking at the records? Am I talking to clinician? And that's where all those questions, which I've just said, that you look at your expertise, you will look at the time available to you, you look at what's the significant, how much money you have and everything else. That's what enables you to decide which approach you take. Is it the audit approach, looking at what's available, or is it the appropriate research proposal and research the program that you're going to do? Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Can I ask you another question? Sorry. If I choose to actually concentrate to the clinicians, And one method to actually investigate it is to create a kind of questionnaire. Is it do I need to choose a different pathway? Is it a special way to create a questionnaire in research, or does it need to be approved by someone before actually use it?
Yes, all of that. But I think first of all, you need to come up with a plan as to research. If it's a research question, which direction you want to go, and then talking to people who would. And I'm happy to talk to you if that helps after that as well. But you need to come up with a question first, or maybe 2 or 3 questions depending on different people, and then we can see what is the best way of going around what.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Parveen. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Lisa.
Hi. Yeah, thank you for that earlier. That hearing you speak is really interesting. And I'm an MBA student about to start my dissertation. I have a question. I've got to submit my research Proforma and my ethics form to the university by the 31st. So I suppose my question is a green place to work, ? Or a green mindset. Examine staff attitudes towards achieving net zero within operating theatres at DVTH. So I'm looking at sustainability within theatres and surgery. I've noticed obviously the organisation has to move towards net zero, and there seems to be a big drive from top down and a fancy plan, but that doesn't seem to be cascading particularly quickly to the staff and the people that actually need to perform a lot of these tasks that will give us that big impact that we need. So it's trying to look at where the disconnect is between what's coming from top down and what the practice actually is within our clinical areas, and if there are any barriers, what those barriers are, to maybe provide some recommendations to the organisation about how to better engage staff to collectively move towards those objectives. So my question around, we have to fill in an ethics Proforma, and one of the things on the form, it obviously doesn't involve any patients, it doesn't involve any relatives, it does involve potentially access to data, but data gathered already by the sustainability team. It doesn't involve police, court officials, so on and so forth, other participants and able to provide consent. But is it a research project as opposed to a service evaluation or audit?
Okay, so it depends. If the service evaluation is usually, so the service evaluation, audit or quality improvement projects are all research. The trouble with NHS is that when you go in there, my God, they've made a big thing about quality improvement is different, audit is different, and research is different. So first thing,
I was confused.
First thing, they all are research. The next thing is that, do you need ethical approval or ethical review for it? And I think that's where this thing comes in, that what is it that you're doing it for? Usually when it comes to reviewing already available data, and if it's anonymized and if it doesn't identify anyone, you could, and if appropriate permissions are there, you could use it without kind of needing to have the going through the ethical approval, unless there are elements which will identify participants or something which is going to, so then you need to go through the ethical process. Having said that, the other element usually is that, what is it that you want to do with the research results? Are you going to publish it as kind of, if you're doing it for PhD or masters or something like that, or are you actually going to publish? That's where most of the journals ask you, have you had ethical approval for your study? And that's where people go for the getting an ethical approval, sometimes when they don't actually need it. Going through the ethical process is useful and helps you learn a lot about not only the process, but helps you understand your protocol, your research approaches, everything else better, and sometimes also helps you modify your question. So I would suggest maybe look at you don't need NHS research ethics if it's an audit and evaluation, but you may want to go to the university ethics, like, you're attached with the university, aren't you?
Yeah, it's true. They do give us an evaluation form to fill in, and they recommend that you try and fall in with, is it Rec 2? Is that the right?
They would have used their own sort of abbreviations.
Yeah, they've got this. If it's Rec 2, it generally is that anonymised, either quantitative, qualitative, mixed methods using research, lit review kind of.
Then you don't need that. So
thing,
audit
but
evaluation, things
ask
like that, you don't need.
Potentially publish, but I think that's so that you're aware that you will have to share any. What's the word from your?
There shouldn't be any identifiable information.
No, I think it's just giving permission that you're giving kudos or credit to your dissertation supervisor. I think that's the reason why they ask for the are you wanting to publish? I don't know if I want to publish at this point. I just want to pass the thing, to be honest. But if it is going to be useful, then who knows? So I suppose it's worth walking that path now rather than doing it in retrospect.
Yes.
But if I've got time before the 31st of October to have that concluded.
I think for the ethics, the idea is that is there any identifiable information? Are you doing it as audit and evaluation? Are you going to publish it? And it's not that you can't publish audit and evaluation, results from audit and evaluation. You can publish it. So if those are the you don't need ethics. All you need is appropriate permission and make sure the data is anonymized and everything else. And I don't think even your supervisors would sort of, we want to ascertain that, you need to acknowledge. I think it's good practice. You should acknowledge people who you have worked with, because your dissertation wouldn't be possible without your supervisor's sort of support. But if it's an audit and evaluation, no, you don't need the thing. But I would suggest go through the Proforma, because it allows you and makes you very clear in your head as to what you're doing and helps you write your methods section better.
I've discussed it with my director group and they're supportive of it. Do I need to send a copy of that Proforma to yourself in the research department, or do I just get their approval?
I think their approval is fine. It's always good to kind of know what's going on, and I'm more than happy to talk to you and help you take that forward. We are developing some processes within the organization where we would like to ensure that we capture what's happening, partly because people do all that good work, but then it never gets translated into practice, because you see, you're doing it for your masters, but then life gets so busy, work is so busy. It's how do you then make use of it to improve practices, partly because of that. But as I say, I'm more than happy to talk to you. As long as you've got appropriate permission and you look at those aspects, I think it's fine.
Brilliant.
But you don't need an extra
help. Thank you.
Anybody else? So if you're not asking me question, I'm going to pick up on you. So while Sarah is going to share the link about the feedback, I'll just come back and ask you, how did you, so maybe just going by one. So maybe I'll go to on my list. So Nigel, how did you find the session? And I'm not looking for saying, oh, this was really great and everything else, but was it relevant to you, or did you have any other question that you wanted to ask? You can unmute yourself. So while Nigel probably is doing it, so we can go back to Eamon. Eamon, do you have any questions? Are you okay with what we have discussed? Or does that relate? Did the whole thing help any of you or all of you in some ways? Is that what you were expecting, or would you like to have something different? Connie?
Hiya. Yeah, it was really helpful because my role, I work as a research OT, so I kind of carry out other people's studies all the time. That's my job role. And so kind of thinking how I want to get into start doing my own research project.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's actually kind of getting started on that, because I only get involved once they're already this like fully fledged, they're off an NIHR, nationally adopted portfolio studies. So, they've kind of gone through all that, and I don't see how to even get started. So yeah, it definitely got me thinking about some of the things about where would I even start to kind of narrow that down?
So it doesn't actually have to be kind of, if you're dealing with other people's studies, so, you might think, oh my God, I need to have my own clinical question to do it. Your clinical question could also relate to, because if you're looking at a lot of studies coming from various different clinicians, you are in a good position to see, is there anything that you need to study from that perspective? Like, do people research? I don't know. Do everybody ask for consent? I mean, it's a stupid question, which I'm saying, but something which is cross-cutting and something which relates to the studies that people are doing, or the processes around it, instead of having your own clinical question.
Yes, I see what you're saying. There's definitely things that come out in terms of themes that I see kind of coming up again and again. So yeah, that's another aspect actually that I hadn't really thought about.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Who else wants to go? Florentius? Lauren?
I think yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, sorry, is it Lauren?
Yes, it is. Hi. Sorry, I'm currently at work at the moment, so I'll just kind of ask. I think it was really helpful, Lisa's question, and I think that applies to me because I'm also starting my dissertation this year as well. And I think I do have a bit of a question in mind. I haven't fully fleshed it out yet, but I think I'm just thinking about the ethics and how I go about that. I think, would it be okay if I email you separately and just kind of discuss my topic with you at some point?
Yeah, sure. I run Ideas Clinic at the hospital, so where I help people kind of come up with those answer those questions or help with that. So yeah, please do get in touch with myself or Keely, and we can set something up for you.
Thank you.
Okay, Leslie.
Hi.
Hello.
So I am considering doing a quality improvement within the emergency department. I've sort of noticed the triage nurses obviously triage all the patients that come in, and patients that are coming in with chest pain, they're very quick to request a troponin to rule out an MI, but there's very few of them that consider the pleuritic chest pains. And sometimes with the strains of the department, if doctors aren't picking them up till nearly 4 hours, and they then need a D-dimer doing. So I was sort of looking at something like that, but I've only just started my dissertation, so I've just started doing a bit of research, and there seems to be pathways for each of them individually, like NICE and things, but nothing actually, for the triage nurses. If a patient comes in with X, Y, and Z, go down this path, or if they come in with A, B, and C, go down this pathway.
Yeah, maybe what you might find useful is like if there are pathways, and pathways actually tell you this, but maybe what you're looking for is that what's the actual current practice in terms of what actually happens. So maybe talking to nurses that what are the barriers or factors affecting speedy sort of thing. The other way I look at it, that how confident and competent nurses feel in terms of delivering that, doing that themselves. So is it something which can be delegated to nurses? So they don't have to wait for, and what's the evidence around that? And sometimes it could be that doing a survey or asking for things, or looking at the records previously, looking at what role nurses have and what roles doctors have, and could we actually change the practice in some ways? So I wouldn't go for a review sort of a route for you, because the pathways are already established and things are already there, and it's not going to give you anything apart from that you need to. But the problem is that implementing those pathways, because of short staffing, because of other aspects. So how can we actually deal with it? That's the question that you're looking for.
Yeah.
So if you go that way, and I think it would be talking to clinicians, to doctors, nurses, and then to try and see what helps, and what do doctors think, like, their colleagues, are they able to do, what would help them if nurses would have already done this. In many places in the world, nurses may have already there are protocols that if patients comes with this and this, you just do it without even, it's like a little bit like giving aspirin or something, or the what is it that you should start and then wait for something else. So I guess it would be something around that, but you need to think a little bit more as to what your clarify your question and take that further.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank
you. I think Leslie was here. Yeah, Lauren. we've spoken to, I think, Nii Wong or Nigel.
Hi, I'm Nii, one of the rheumatology registrars currently in Doncaster. I think it's very helpful to have a start. I've not actually formed my own research question before, so it's just at this point in time in my career, it's good to get exposure and actually realize from your talk, Parveen, is about reading up a lot first before coming up and deciding what a question and perhaps coming out with my own project. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
And if you're very at the start of your kind of, that kind of journey, it doesn't need to be a massive big thing. It could be something very, things that you pick up that, makes life difficult. And you just think, my God, if we do this, this will probably make it things a lot easier. So in saying how to change your practice, even if it's a small little sort of thing, small little audit, and maybe that would help you start, because if you decided to go a little big, it can be a bit overwhelming, especially when you're overworked, everything else is going on. So maybe think slowly and work with other people as well. That may also help.
Yeah, that's definitely a good tip. We're currently doing like a regional registrar audit and quality improvement, and we're trying to make it very specific, because the last few years our project didn't quite go through very well, because maybe we're quite ambitious. So that's very helpful as well that you've mentioned. It has to be more specific, and we'd have to change the world in a big chunk.
Yeah, change the world, but slowly and gradually, not all of a sudden.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, Nigel and then Razia. Okay, Razia, do you have any questions? Are you okay?
No, I'm fine. It was a good session. I'm a consultant pediatrician, and I think I have been a co-PI and things like that in the past. But yes, I think this was a good insight, because I've never really thought about my own research, and so this was a really good introduction to starting with developing a research question and things like that. So thank you for the session.
Thank you. You're welcome. And as always, please always, if I can help with anything, please do feel free to contact me. Who is next? Richard? Richard Lawrence? Sam?
Yeah, I think that was a useful session for me. I'm starting my dissertation, and I've not yet decided on my research questions. So I think, yeah, a few things to think about. So,
thank you. Victoria Wilson?
Hi, yeah, we're doing a lot of work in our hand unit at the moment on clinical guidelines. So it's given me some really good structure to actually go about that, because one of the things I always do is have such a big open-ended topic, trying to change the world, as you say. So you've made me focus, because I don't do that. Yeah,
good. Yeah, it is like if you usually the examples from the kitchen are really useful, and sometimes I hate these, because I just think it's very stereotypical, maybe kind of a gendered or something like that. But the thing is that these make sense, that if you have got large number of people coming in and you wanted to cook a lot, if you decided to start all of that at the same time, it's not going to work. So it's chunks, smaller things, and and change the world, but doing it bit by bit. Yeah.
Thank you. It was really useful.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And I think I've not missed anyone, have I? If anyone else has any comments, any questions, anything else, please do fill in the feedback form. If you can do it now, that would be useful, because once you're finished, with the best will in the world, we want to do it, but we never get the time. But your feedback helps us improve the session, and also makes us kind of think that these are needed, because otherwise it's just easier to think that perhaps I'm just talking to myself, because nobody actually needs it. So please do give some feedback, and that would be great. So Sarah, over to you if you wanted to look at the tips. And sorry, I just got carried away, didn't realize that you were going to do this. Apologies about that.
No, it's fine, don't worry. I'm just going to okay, so it's only going to take a few minutes, but I think it might be helpful if you are at a very early stage, then you'll be able to potentially use one of these question frameworks that will help you consider the concepts that you could explore. A research question is obviously going to provide the focus for searchers, and yes, I do mean searchers in the plural. because you need to look into the literature at different times for different purposes when you're establishing your research kind of context and developing your ideas. So as a minimum, you're going to need to do an initial search to see what's out there relating to the topic that interests you. And that might be to spot what gaps there are in the existing literature where your research idea might fit. Does it add something new to what's already known? And also, if you have already got a well-established topic, what methodologies have been used? And there may be more than you first considered, but by looking and seeing what other people have done in similar areas, or what assessment tools they've used, or just basically harvesting useful bits from other people's research, you're going to need to be doing a quick search across the literature. If your research idea then turns into a journal article, then obviously a pretty comprehensive literature review to incorporate into your article to set the scene for your particular research is going to be pretty important. If you're carrying out a systematic review where the search itself provides the data for the meta-analysis or for the narrative review, then it's absolutely crucial. But that isn't the same as your scoping search to start off with. That one search will not carry all of that weight. You're going to have to focus your searches for different purposes. And there are frameworks that can help you do that, either starting out to set your research question or later to develop the search that you need in order to provide the material. So I know Parveen's mentioned PICO and PO. This is a very typical clinical question type format, and it's to prompt you to consider the different elements in the question. And so a classic clinical question has a population, an intervention, potentially a comparison and an outcome. But actually PICO can be translated in and be more useful for observational studies, for qualitative research, and in which case you kind of smudge the C and the O together and it provides context. So you would still have a patient and population, you would have an intervention or a phenomenon of interest, and then the context in which that's set. So it's bendable. There's not meant to be a straitjacket. It's meant to support your consideration of the topic and the concepts within your question. So PICO is probably the most famous, but it can bend and be useful in a couple of different ways. But there are several. I've got a few examples to show you. So Eclipse is one that can be really useful for where you're considering potentially service redesign, or whether you've got a qualitative sort of idea that you need to set within particular professional group or a particular service. So in this example, and I've color coded it for ease, we won't do anything too interactive, but it helps to identify the different elements within the question. So what expectation for this particular question does self-monitoring of diabetes result in reduced admissions for older people in the community? Then what expectation, what is it, the innovation that you want to see? It's the reduced admissions. And the client group is obviously older people, community, or maybe you would phrase that as primary care. What impact that could be, that's the sort of self-monitoring, the self-care idea. For this example, there aren't professionals involved, but you might want to root it in the literature around diabetes care. So you can bend it a little bit, but it might help with the structure of your thinking. So Eclipse is quite handy. Spice is one that I know Parveen mentioned earlier. Now this it's typically used for qualitative kind of research, but it's not necessarily so. So this particular question, can mortality rates for older people be reduced if a greater proportion are examined initially by allied health staff in A&E, has lots of kind of interesting and potentially quantitative angles to it. So obviously your setting is A&E, your population group is the older people, you're curious about initial examination, and there is a comparison there, but it's the subtext of that question, it's not explicit. You're looking at lower mortality rates, and the flip side of initial examination by AHPs may well be initial examination by medical staff. So you could populate every piece of the SPICE kind of table, although you wouldn't necessarily need to. Spider is another one that is actually, it can work in many ways, but it's very typically for qualitative research. I haven't done the kind of clicky swoopy thing with this one because it's obvious how this is going to work. Instead of just a population, a P, you've got the phenomenon of interest there, and your sample represents who is being studied. You could populate the design column with any which way, how do you want to carry this out? So interviews, focus groups, surveys, all sorts of methods are available. And the evaluation it's more about what outcome do you want to look at, what is being impacted as a result of the phenomenon of interest. And so it's experiences, it could be perceptions, it could be lots of different things in that column. And you're clearly going to look at qualitative studies to examine that particular aspect. So there, if you're interested in the idea of a framework to support your question, all of these are available on Google, and many universities already give you examples and sample questions. So it's quite a straightforward thing to get hold of these formats. If you want a kind of a Word document with some of these on, then do let me know and I can send that to you. And there is me. If you want to contact me about literature searching and brushing up your search skills, then please do. Obviously, I won't be carrying out the search for you if your search is for study, but if you want to brush up your skills, I'll certainly help you do that with a question that you're interested in. You can use that to provide some pegs to hang the techniques off. And I think there are some people in the audience who've taken advantage of a database search session, and hopefully they will be able to give me a good reference. So I'm just danced across some of the frameworks, but please do contact me for more information or if you'd like to go over anything one-to-one. And I will stop sharing now. You're on mute, Ivy.
Sorry. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. That was really useful. So that really brings us towards the end of our session. If we, unless anyone has any questions, anything that you would like to ask at all? If you all are okay, do you mind putting your cameras on and we can record the conversation, take a photograph, basically? My brain is not working, is it? And I'll stop live stream and I will take a photo. And I need to go through the various different buttons because I have forgotten which one is for. Okay. Let me take another photo if that's fine. Thank you, everybody. And please do get in touch if you have got any questions or if you would like to book an appointment through Ideas Clinic to discuss any ideas that you have any further. And please do give us some feedback and any other suggestions or any other ideas of any topics that you would like us to talk about.